Nina Curtis is a world-renowned vegan chef. Her dishes have been savored on the palates of presidents, prime ministers, and foreign dignitaries. Most recently, she made history by becoming the first chef to prepare and serve an all plant-based meal at the White House's state dinner for Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. When we talk about what led her to a life and a career built on veganism, her somewhat improbable journeys merged on the Venice Beach bodybuilding scene, where eating a plant-based diet helped her performance and recovery in competitions. Her ethos today in the kitchen isn't ego-driven or based upon her celebrity chef status. Instead, her guiding force is the examples of her father and her mother and the ever-present voices and the legacies of her ancestors, of whom she says, "I'm always working to be quiet enough to hear their whispers and their guidance." And their whispers tell her to humbly do your work. Keep your head down and use food to build allyhood, brotherhood, and sisterhood among people, among governments, among nations. Hello and welcome to At the Podium with me, Patrick Huey. At the Podium is a multimedia platform that brings together people from a diverse background of lives, careers, and experiences who all share one thing in common. They have stepped fully into the transformative power of finding and raising their voices to make an impact on the world we live in today. At the Podium holds a space for everyone to share their stories, to be heard, and to bring us inspiration. Today, I'm thrilled to share the podium with Chef Nina Curtis. Chef Nina Curtis is the director and executive chef of Plantish & Co. Culinary Arts. With over 2 decades of experience, she is celebrated for her exceptional skill and creative prowess in plant-based cuisine. Her passion for whole plant cuisine has made her a respected thought leader and trailblazer in the plant-based culinary movement. Chef Curtis presents lectures and demonstrations on health, nutrition, and whole plant-based foods around the country. She served as executive chef at The Ranch at Live Oak, Malibu, the acclaimed 7-day fitness and wellness boot camp, and she was the chief nutrition officer for the Ranch Daily, a meal subscription service in Southern California. As of June 2023, Chef Curtis proudly announced her membership with the American Culinary Corps, a joint effort between the James Beard Foundation and the State Department, aiming to promote culinary diplomacy and cultural exchange on a global scale. Also, in June 2023, she made history by becoming the first chef to curate an all plant-based menu for a state dinner at the White House, serving President Joe Biden, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Chef Curtis is an MBA graduate of Pepperdine University and was also trained at Living Light Culinary Institute, Trinity School of Natural Health, the Natural Gourmet Culinary Institute, and she holds a plant-based nutrition certificate from the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutritional Studies at Cornell. Chef Curtis, welcome to At the Podium.
Thank you. Good morning, Patrick. It's such a pleasure after all these years of knowing each other. I'm like, okay, if we have to meet at the podium at this moment, I'm going for it.
We are doing it. I know.
Yes, we've both been on stages around the world at the podium, literally.
At the podium.
This feels very timely.
It really is. And I think we're going to have a beautiful conversation about your career, your relationship to food and nutrition, which are all of the moment that we're living in today. So critical. So thank you for making time today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I want to start. You had this great quote about your time at the White House, which we're going to talk about. But you said in this quote, and I have to say, it touched my heart in many ways because A, I'm a history buff. B, I was recently at the White House this year. So I understand what it means to walk through those spaces and see those historical pictures and it's the big stage setting for diplomacy in our government. So what you said was, it touched me when I read it. And what you said of your time at the White House was, I felt very privileged, but it made me think of our ancestors, that through all their suffering and pain, they must have had a sixth sense or superpower to endure. I went through this journey of standing in the kitchen where my ancestors stood, and that was a lot. And I
Yeah.
wonder, now that you've had some time away, maybe 6, 7 weeks away from that experience at the White House, I wonder what that was like for you, standing in that house, in that kitchen, and all of the history that you embodied and symbolized at that state dinner for the Indian Prime Minister. Do you have any perspective on that now?
I do. And it's a ongoing process,
Mm.
because every day, even if I'm talking about it with you, or I read something that someone's written, because things are still coming out. I remember someone saying, okay, you got 2 weeks and then they're going to forget about you. And I was like, oh, not me, not my ancestors.
No,
And
no.
it's really been the case. So it was a lot, and I didn't expect it, because I'm so used to um, cooking for and being in kitchens where there are high profiles. And being in the White House, though, I kind of looked around the kitchen. I looked at everybody, and while it's modernized and has all the latest equipment and things that we would need, I definitely heard my ancestors speaking to me. And it was one of, you're safe here, you're welcome here, and we didn't do all we did for you not to be here. And that's where that quote comes from. But on the daily, because I always already speak to the ancestors, I'm always working to be quiet enough to hear their whispers and their guidance. And that's my life. And that's been my life. And that's my testimony. So while I knew what I was there for, and I'm used to doing that, it was an experience like no other, because it was the White House.
Yeah.
And I had already, like you, done quite a bit of history. I love culinary and I love food for that, because you really learn a history lesson every time you cook, depending on how you're cooking. And because I love the global kind of cuisine, even though it's through the lens of plant-based, I've learned so much about cultures, and I can talk to so many people from around the world. So it is ongoing. There's messages coming up that I don't think I would have thought would be continuing, but I'm receiving them.
Mm. Were you surprised that the interest and the story continues past the 2 weeks? Because normally people move very quickly through
Yes.
events that happen, because there's so
Yeah.
much that we are being inundated with around story and, narrative in the media and in television and in newspapers. Are you surprised that these 2 weeks that you've survived past the 2 week window of people's?
I don't know if I was surprised. I'm humbled. My dad is a chef throughout his working life, and he'd always say, "You're only good as your last plate. So don't get a big head. Keep going." So I'm humbled in that, because I know I served that last plate, and that is that last plate. But what I've learned through this experience, or what I'm trying to take in, because that chef Nina that would be like, on to the next, get on the plane. I've already done so many other things, is there was a lesson for me to learn besides and beyond the experience. And it was very destined for me, although I wasn't expecting it. It was quite a surprise. So I do think, and what I've realized, people wonder what it's like behind the walls there.
Yeah.
People wonder what it's like. So I'm kind of that conduit to a lot of people that look like me, that might go, oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Even some of the looks when I walk down the hall, and that look, we're like, oh, we got one in the house, Margot.
Ah, yes. Yes.
Some will
It's
understand.
interesting that you say that, because you remarked that while this is a huge moment in so many ways that you cook this all plant-based meal for the Indian Prime Minister and the First Lady and the President and Nancy Pelosi, you commented two things that really stood out and that made me go, wow. First, you were like, there have been Black cooks in the White House for centuries.
For
That
life.
in and of itself is not remarkable.
All right.
So you shouted out to the staff who have been there and really, in many ways, hold the secrets, hold the legacy, hold the story of the country within their fraternity and sisterhood. Those staff members, and many of them are Black or people of color. That's just the reality of who works at the White House. And the second thing that you said that struck me was, yes, it's the White House kitchen and it's all of that. And you said, but at the same time, if you don't have the fruit or the vegetable, you don't have it and it's not going in the recipe. So what are we going to do now? So I love that even in the midst of the esteem of that, there is the reality of we just don't have that fruit or that vegetable in season right now. So what are we doing? That it was just, it's real. You got to cook.
Yeah, yeah. No, and all my years of cooking and starting at a very early age, at 8, being the eldest of 4, and my mom, this delicious cook. I think she's the best cook in the world. And my dad being a technically trained, French trained, classically trained, as they say, chef, you know, seeds are always planted unbeknownst to us. Seeds are always planted unbeknownst to us by others, maybe even unbeknownst to them. And so that moment in the kitchen with the team, who was wonderful, it's not their first rodeo. They have guest chefs coming in quite a bit, and the whole, drama and dynamics of it, not so much drama, but the theatrical aspects of it, they were already ready. So I'm always very intent when I go into someone else's space to really check out what is happening and to try and fit in as quickly as I can. I'm not a prima donna. I'm a hands-on chef, even as an executive chef. I'm in the trenches with my team. And so me having that just way about me, I think allowed me to fit in and not stand out.
Mm-hmm. What was the process like for you being selected by the First Lady? And how much input did you have with her and the menu selection and what was going to be the settings for the food and what was going to actually be on the menu? So what was that negotiation like with the First Lady?
I had a lot. Maybe a lot. I'm very collaborative. So I was like, whoa, this better go right. Otherwise, Chef Nina Curtis is the one that's going to be blasted all over media and everything else. So when I first got the call, you can imagine, I had to think, okay, who's pranking me? I have some really great friends that are very supportive and they're always cheering me on. So my first thought was someone's decided to call and say, oh, well, you're going to the White House. That's how bad you are. And then once I realized, no, this is real. And I was speaking with First Lady Dr. Jill Biden's social secretary, and he is the one that said, Dr. Jill Biden has chosen you to be our guest chef for this event, and then started very quickly laying out the process, because it was like, do you receive this? It wasn't like, you're going to do this or else you're no longer a U.S. citizen.
Right.
It was very much so, do you have the time? And it was very gracious. So at that point, it was very quickly outlined what needed to be done and how quickly it needed to be turned. Once again, I've been groomed for this. So I was told that First Lady Dr. Jill Biden definitely wanted to show the best of American cuisine. Of course, you have foreign dignitaries coming in, you have people come in, you're not trying to serve them what they eat necessarily in their country. You're trying to show what we have and then make that blend. And they were really, through all the news, wanting to tie bonds and build strength and friendship and trust. So food is very powerful. So I laid out, it came down to 12 different items that we prepared for First Lady and her team to taste, menu taste, as we call it. And so once I got to the White House, after we went back and forth with executive chef Chris Comaford and executive pastry chef Susan Morrison, through Zoom and through email, the way we work today, we were able to say, okay, seasonally, this is available locally, but not just local. I mean, the White House is very diplomatic. They've got to support the United States. And then finding where the influences and the accents of Indian cuisine came in. And I really love Indian food. So it was right up my alley, like, okay, I've got this. And then you do your research, just like anything else, you prepare. It's not like, oh, I've made this 1,000 times and that's what's going to happen. So that was laid out. I get to the White House. And because it's really busy, you got to be on your toes. Again, I've been trained for this. We did the tasting with First Lady and her team. And they very quickly decided and actually said to me, it was hard to make a decision on which 3 of the 3-course menu. So that felt good because remember, Patrick, it's plant-based. It's not I don't want to say typical, but the customary protein, as they'll call it. We have protein in plant-based food. Let me make that clear. It wasn't the standard, I'm going to say. And I think, the brain for people that are expecting one thing and they get another, delightfully surprised, it has to shift. So that process was really about what I presented as the curator, as the director, if you will. And then I worked very closely with executive chef Chris and executive pastry chef Susie, as she likes to be called. And we really combined. I'm very collaborative. So for me, I knew I'm not going in there and telling people what to do. I'm going in there and getting right at the, cutting board, as I like to say, with them. So anything that they picked, I had curated. So
right.
It was there. Yeah.
What surprised you the most about the experience?
How welcoming everyone was. And I mean that by, I've always looked at the White House, and I still do, as this institution.
Yes.
At this, huge institution. You stand outside, you're behind the gate looking in, and this White House is just massive. And I realized I probably thought, wow, there's just nothing but business going on in there. But in actuality, the president and first lady and, their family live there. And so the whole time from the initiation of the call and then physically being there, I was so surprised at how much I felt like someone had invited me to their home and they showed me grace and respect. And Dr. Jill Biden was the host with the most. She spoke to me from the time we met and then the interactions that we had up until the dinner, like, not that we were best friends, but that definitely I was welcomed in their home. And not that I'll go and knock on the door and say, hey, it's me again. But that was surprising to me because I expected, while it was a, organization that runs really tight and why we were able to pull off what we did, it just was, everyone was so gracious and welcoming. And what do you need, chef? And I'm that chef. Tell me where it is and I'll go get it. So I very quickly said, no. When I ask for something, I don't mean for you to take off and get it. I mean for you to show me where it is because you've got something to do. And I think all of that decorum and that part of me also made them go, okay, she's one of us. That's what they made me feel like. And that was surprising.
Yeah. I loved when you said that you were at the White House, you're preparing the meal. And you said there wasn't a moment when you like ran out to meet everybody, that you really humbly did your work and focused on the task that you had at hand, which was to build those bonds of connection and brotherhood and sisterhood between these two countries, two very important allies in the world of democracy. And oftentimes people look at opportunities as a way to promote themselves, just to be perfectly frank. And you sort of didn't do that. And I thought that in and of itself speaks to the caliber of person that you are and who they brought in to prepare this very important dinner for all of those diplomats and officials.
Yeah. I mean, it is, years back, it's still very new, this celebrity chef thing.
Yeah.
That's what we call food media. When I came up and watched my dad, I had another friend whose mom was a catering chef, and from LA, I see chefs. Chefs were in the kitchen with their head down, that tech neck thing going on, and really intense. And so when the chef came out to the dining room, or the guests would want to see the chef and thank them, that was a big thing. So I think, well, I'm not that old. I think I really got that kind of old school wisdom that when you're invited somewhere, it isn't about me. It wasn't about me. It was about the prime minister coming to America and First Lady Dr. Jill Biden, being the host, because it's the first ladies that handle these kind of things, right? Understood. So when people were like, did you meet the president? Did you meet prime minister? That wasn't the point. They already knew about me. Believe me, they already knew about me. They know more about me than I know about me. So the point, which I have to not think about too much, is like, whoa, a little bit of too much information. The
Yeah.
point for me was to do the best, not only for, yes, I said earlier, oh, Chef Nina, the one they'd be looking at, but for our country. And so when I walked into the White House, while I was there at that moment, I took on the cloak, if you will, like everybody in there who are civil servants. And my whole life through hospitality, whether it's been in the wellness industry and spa, like we know each other from, or it's been in hospitality. And I say this often to people, especially new people coming up into the industry. First and foremost, we are hospitality. So I have no qualms with saying, I love serving you. I happen to love serving you food, I believe, to live for, not to die for.
Right. What was it like for you? You alluded to this. Your father is a chef. Your mother a wonderful cook in her own right. What was it like for you telling them this is what I'm doing?
Right, right.
And what was their
Well,
reaction to that?
you sign some things that to keep your mouth shut until it's time to open it. But the story was supposed to hit the Monday, so that would have been Juneteenth. There are a lot of markers here. That would have been Juneteenth that it was announced who was coming. They do that the day of, but who the chef was and who the performer was. But it leaked Friday before. So that would have been the 7th, 18th, the 16th. So I started getting calls like, it's out, just stay steady if anybody gets to you. And I said, I understand. But Sunday was Father's Day, the 18th. So I text my dad and say, Happy Father's Day. I'm going to continue to keep you proud. And then I called him to wish him a happy Father's Day. And then I told him, and he was like, oh, you're bad stuff now. You have to know my dad. And we had this, wonderful conversation. And my dad, as growing up, Patrick, my mom showed me the hostess with the most, cooking from scratch. She was very much ahead of her time in the sense of what we know today as organics and growing your own garden. And then my dad was the production side. So unbeknownst to me at that time, but now that I can look back, again, seeds planted. I saw the production side of pushing out, like just cut onions. Don't say anything. Don't cry. You just need to cut that bucket of onions. And then I saw my mom being very detailed about how people experienced her meals. So I have very different conversations with him. Like my dad and I got into the politics and, he texted me. He's going to say, why did you say that? But he texted me while I was there and I looked down at my phone and says, tell Joe I said hello. And I was like, who is this? Who am I supposed to? Who's Joe? And then my mom, we got more into, well, what are you cooking and what's the recipe and why are you using that? So it's always they're my heroes, my mom and my dad and my grandmother, she's transitioned, but they're my heroes. So if they give me the green light, I'm golden. Everything else is icing on the cake. And anything else that comes at me, I've got that okay already, but my parents okayed this. My parents are happy with this. And that's going to be till the day I transition. That is how I think. So that also gave me, along with the layer of ancestors, and then my parents still here to see this, They were there when I graduated with my MBA. and I got an award, and they just come along with me, whether it's in real life or virtually. Those are the two that I'm always checking, like, are you still claiming me? Because there was a time when I first told my dad that I was going vegan, that he was like, you're weird. Don't tell my friends. Don't tell people this. I'm in this industry. And he's really come around to respect me.
Mm. I think it's so interesting that you said that because as I've been reading your story and thinking about food and particularly how Black people relate to food, I was like, I wonder how she transitioned into the vegan world because that is not a traditional path that you see many Black people walk down. We're very much meat driven. I think in many places there's skepticism about veganism and what that means. And I wonder, how was that journey for you moving into the vegan space?
Over 2 decades ago, it was very different from how it is now, because as a group of people, African Americans are really transitioning to plant-based veganism faster than any other group
Mhm.
today. Back then, I was an anomaly, and I remember, and how I came to veganism. Let me start with that. I was natural bodybuilding competitively, Venice Beach type of bodybuilding, barefoot, Hercules type Hulk. And so, yeah, and I'm very strong in that. So I woke up one day literally, and it was like my body was like, nope, we don't want any more animal flesh, and we don't want any animal secretions. And I was like, I asked myself, where am I going to get my protein?
Mm.
But I was studying nutrition already. I was already into fitness and wellness. So food was very important to me. Before a contest, 6 months ahead, you had to really start cutting things down. My mom would pray that I wouldn't compete in the next contest. I was entering at 9% body fat. I'm
Wow.
5'9" and was weighing in at 140. So I'm already in heavyweight because my height and everything. But it was very strenuous on the body. And I wasn't taking any what they call juice, because that wasn't the way I wanted to go. So at that point, I did the deep dive. I just, and even the nutrition information out at the time was kind of like, we don't know about that. Where are you going to get your B12? Where are you going to get your protein? I kept digging, digging, digging. Again, being from LA, there's a lot available to you. So I didn't have to look back. And it was very easy to start taking my favorite dishes
Mhm.
and converting them. But on Thanksgiving Day, I remember my first vegan Thanksgiving was actually raw vegan. I drove to Hermosa Beach. There was a woman that was from Europe that had opened a raw vegan restaurant. I had Black Forest cake. I was like, where's the pumpkin pie? Can you do this raw?
Yeah.
And I sat there by myself. My two Akitas were in the car. We went over to Hermosa Beach. After I ate, I actually purchased a second meal so I could take it home and have it the next day, because I tried to stay in my zone of familiarity
Mm.
where we'd all take a plate from my mom's. My mom made me my own pumpkin pie. There's four of us. She made me my own pumpkin pie. So I realized I was trying to stay in my zone of familiarity, but I did it. And my dad was like, what are you going to do? My mom was like, who's going to eat the pie? I was like, my brother will. He'll be fine with it. He'll be happy to get it. So that whole experience just kept strengthening me. People would be traveling and doing these workshops in these most obscure places. And I'd be turning up and we'd be cracking coconuts, young Thai coconut all together.
Yeah.
And we'd have these, cookout. And a lot of it was raw vegan, because I was already vegan. To me was easy. The raw vegan really caught my attention, and the nutrition and all that went along with it. So I just have never looked back, because my recovery time was faster while I was bodybuilding. My rest, my sleep was better. And I was still competing and placing and winning with a lot of the shows. So it was a no brainer to me. It was like, why hasn't anyone talked to me about this? Why haven't, my studies been about this? So,
Mm.
yeah.
What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have about a plant-based diet?
Right. Besides people asking about protein, and that's being, people are realizing, you can get a lot of protein and bioavailable protein. And it's not, you've got to eat rice and beans to get the protein. I mean, there are complete proteins. And if we're eating a balanced meal all day, you're getting that. You need a variety of foods, no matter what your diet is. I
Hmm.
think the largest misconception that I'm seeing now is that everybody believes, oh, I'm eating a vegan diet, whether that's Oreos and that's what they have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or whether it's whole plant-based scratch cooking that I advocate for. So I see a challenge in people realizing highly processed foods, no matter where they're on the scale, whether it's vegan processed food or and other conventional processed foods are the problem. That's where our health diet related diseases are coming from. And to me, and my focus and my interest and my advocacy is really focused on whole plant-based foods. And while I'm a chef, working in restaurants, I still want people to realize you should be doing most of your own cooking. And so I help people with that, thinking that vegan is vegan across the board. And there's a lot of different pockets, like all of the other diets. We shouldn't be focused on a diet that is not sustainable. We should be focused on food and nutrition. And of course, my dad would say it better be delicious, or I don't care about all the health benefits of it to
Yeah.
that degree. But that is a huge thing that I see happening now, and that concerns me.
Hmm. What do you think are the social, economic, even political ramifications if we start to shift the dynamic and structure around how food is farmed, who's farming it, what's in it, how it's marketed, as we start to move to a more plant-based type of food economy? Where are the touch points and the rubbing points going to be? Because that will happen.
Oh, of course, it's
It's
happening.
already it's happening
It's
now.
happening. It's attachment to food. It's attachment to our history. It's attachment to our culture. It's attachment to comfort food because I'm going to reach out and eat this because I'm not feeling good versus I would just normally eat this. I mean, there's a lot that goes on with food, as you said, from mental health to the political aspect of it. Those who control our food control us. And it's now to the point I agree with those that are saying those that control our seeds control us. We have land, we're cutting down the rainforest, we're cutting down forests for more industrial animal business that is taking away from people eating the food that's being fed to these animals. Animals are being fed things they would never naturally eat. So it gets quite deep, and I'm going to try to stay in my lane because this could become a 3-hour conversation. You really took the lid off of Pandora's box here with me. I think most of my career, if not all of it, has been serving people who are not vegan, who are not plant-based. When I was at the ranch, we had a 2-acre farm that had been certified organic, and people would come for a minimum of a week with us. 99.9% not vegan, but we served all vegan fare. That's what the owner wanted to do. We didn't even do tofu. We didn't use any alternatives, meats. Everything was scratch, even making ketchup, hot sauce, those kind of things, which I loved. But by Wednesday of the week, they came in Sunday, people would start saying, if I could eat like this every day, I would be vegan. So I also have heard a lot of people say, I just didn't know. So I think education is going to be important. I think compassion, what people don't think about, if they are numb to what happens to the animal and why a pet is domesticated and a pig that tends to be smarter than a dog is not, okay, that's one thing we have to deal with because our messaging, our media can really numb us. And it's even numbing us as humanity. But we're not thinking about the people that are behind the closed doors that are preparing and breaking down these foods so that it can be on our plate and be of luxury. Because most people would not do what it takes to get a lot of the food on their plate. And so now we get into the human aspect of it and the mental anguish and the violence. And then how do those people then go out into our society? And there's a lot going on there that people don't like to talk about. So I'm first concerned about our humanity as people and how we respect each other, how we protect and are guardians of sentient beings, how we take care of our planet so we have a place to live. I don't want to go to Mars. I do not want to go to Mars with unsaid person. I want to stay right here. I want to have soil. It's all about the soil and the nutrients. And if we're, just beating up the soil and it doesn't have time to rejuvenate, it gets so deep. It gets so deep. But I say all this to say, most cultures around the world primarily eat the blue zones, the longest lived people. When you look, and one of the 9 PowerPoints is plant slant. And, the 80-20 rule, stop eating when you're 80% full. And these processed foods don't give the brain the signal that we've gotten the nutrient density. So we have this obese society, kids now, first time in a century, getting type 2 diabetes. And I'm trying to answer your question and bring it back home because I got 5 lanes in front of me that I want to run down and take you with me.
I'm with you.
All that to say, we cannot continue on the way we're at on any level, from a mental, a physical, or a spiritual level. It's much larger than the food, but the food is huge because you talk about, everyone should have a safe place to sleep at night and a warm meal. And that's where I'm constantly focused on. Why do we have homelessness? Why do we have children starving? Not just in third world countries. We have it here in the United States, in North America. And we're the oldest democracy. Haven't we learned anything yet?
And it's interesting. I interviewed a gentleman for this show named Quentin Benny, and he freely says that he grew up in a food desert in the ghettos of Baltimore, Maryland. And the question becomes, is there a way to provide healthy food for people in underserved areas that can be nutritious and delicious and they can afford it? And then how do we democratize access to healthy food for everybody?
Yeah, there's definitely a way, and it's happening. It's happening. I've worked the past 3 years with food literacy here in Sacramento, and they go into schools 1st grade to 6th grade, and they're teaching the kids. So the way we do it is getting our youth, getting their hands, as I say, in the soil, getting their hands dirty, helping them to understand. I don't know if you remember in school when we had our seeds in the soil, and then we watched that first sprout. It was like life. I did that. No, you didn't, but you were in the process. I think that same feeling kids get. I made a mushroom burger because we'd have these competitions, and each chef, 5 local chefs, pretty well-known chefs, would get a vegetable, and we'd have to, now I'm talking about 1st grade to 6th grade. These are the hardest critics. I don't know if you've been in front of kids. They're going to tell you what they feel. They're going to tell you what they're not going to eat. They're going to tell you how they think you look. Why do you talk that way? I mean, you have to have thick skin. And I made beet chips. And then I got portobello mushrooms. So I cut it down to a slider size and pretzel bun. I mean, I did kind of cheat. Who turns away a pretzel bun? But I made ketchup. And I made, we had mustard on it and all the trimmings that one would like. And this little girl turned around to me and said, "This is the best burger I've ever had. And I'm loving these beet chips." And I was like, "How many burgers have you had in your life?" But I'll take it. I'll take it because I was competing with probably McDonald's or Burger King or one of those fast foods, because these kids tend to not know vegetables outside of a can. So the goal has been, and the person that runs food literacy, and there are others, hot spots around the country. And then we have community gardens. So there is a lot grassroots going on, even from LA. I know where we define it as a desert, but we have a birthright. And if we really understand our food, whether you're from Africa, India, China, Brazil, anywhere in the world, most of the foods and the longest foods we've eaten have been plant-based and are plant-based.
Yeah.
And we cannot dispute that.
Mm. In your work with America Culinary Corps and the James Beard Foundation and the government, can food really be that agent of diplomacy in ways that perhaps just sitting around the table, debating points can't be? Can food really bring people together in a way that is meaningful and affect change?
Sure. It definitely can. I've experienced it, and I experienced it very early on. If I want to get that permit from West Hollywood for my business at the time, I knew that meeting at 3 o'clock was right when they needed a snack. And coming in with, a basket of baked goods to go along with the coffee they already had that had sat there since 10 a.m. It was pretty easy to break bread, to come together, to be able to have someone bite into something I made while listening to what my needs were. It takes down the walls and the barriers of this everyday monotonous kind of thing. Okay, let's take it to the White House. Let's take it anywhere. What does it mean to break bread? It means to come together. It means to share a meal and maybe let go of our differences for the moment when literally and figuratively we're having this bread, whether it's crackers, whether it's pita, whatever it is, wherever you're at. And then look at the restaurant industry when it's not a new thing, but it came to be like we do more communal tables.
Oh,
So
yeah.
now you're sitting with people you don't even know and you strike a conversation and you strike maybe a deal. And then you are at the White House, and now you're able to serve the first ever in the history of White House state dinners, a plant-based menu to honor your guest, a dignitary that is a strict vegetarian. And while we weren't trying to make the Indian food that he can have anytime he wants, we definitely showed how food can come together using cuisine and produce from America, local and other, and then taking spices and elements of Indian cuisine together. And I was told people were just talking and really enjoying themselves. So while food, I think, is an equalizer, it allows people to, for a moment, for a meal, for a time, focus on that and not all the noise that is around us. Why do we have comfort food? Because it comforts us when we aren't feeling good, when we're suffering, when we're hurting, when there's anguish. It doesn't mean it's the best food we choose, but the brain already knows. Seek comfort, and people seek that in food. And I want to say, with our ancestors also, no matter who your ancestors are, I believe we all feel, I definitely feel, as I said, my ancestors must have had a sixth sense and were superpowers. But if they could take what they were given that you'll read was bare to nothing and they made it into magic, in the 21st century, in 2023, they're telling me, girl, you better run. We didn't do all this for you to try to continue to do what we did because you're afraid you're going to lose your culture. No, take all that, not just the ingredients, take the meaning of it. And that is what I got from the White House. That is what I get to carry every day with me. How can I make it better? I'm not losing anything about my culture, whether it's African American or Lumbee Indian. I'm not losing any of that and the in between that's in there. My grandmother used to tell me I was Hungarian goulash. I thought it was a race until I made it in school and I realized it was a recipe. So I think we have to stop for a moment and not get so caught up in the politicals, get so caught up in who owns which culture, cuisine, and all, and try to find coming together where we can be better. Every morning that I'm given the opportunity to get up again, because it's not guaranteed every day, I respect that. I am thankful and grateful, and I thank my creator, God, for the opportunity then to be better than my best. I can't do anything about yesterday, but I can do something about today that impacts me moving forward.
Mm.
So yes, food has a huge impact.
Major. Chef Curtis, do you claim the mantle of role model?
I have nieces and nephews, so I definitely do. Representation is important.
Mm.
Representation is important. So if that is, I get to represent and be a role model, I am not speaking for any group of people, whether it's chefs, whether it's female chefs, whether it's plant-based chefs, whether it's the vegan community, but I am showing up in my fullest to represent one, who I am and what I'd like to see, which I didn't see a lot of growing up. And so for my nieces and nephews, yes, I am working intently to be a role model. And then I think, like with my family and my parents, if I get that done, then I feel good about that representation. I don't have to say, oh my gosh, what was I thinking on social media? Why did I choose to do that? And I'll leave that alone. I'm just speaking for myself because I, again, like our ancestors, this comes and will be going on long after I'm here, but I'm going to transition. So I'll always be here in spirit.
Yeah. What has been your biggest leap of faith in your life? You've done so much.
Ooh.
What is that thing, that moment that you had to really step out on faith and you didn't know what the result or the answer was going to be, and yet you did it anyway?
Yeah. I think it's almost a gene that we get, and whether we activate it or not, that's one thing. I think we all have the gene, but I've always had this gene of standing on the edge and jumping and figuring I'll get my wings before I hit the ground. I've also felt that I was created and I've been gifted to give my gifts out. And so whether I was doing a facial aromatherapy or massage, or whether I'm serving food, because I've done them together and people haven't even realized how long I've been at this, that gift is not for me to hold inside because of my fear of acceptance.
Mm.
And in the kitchen, you get thick skin. In life, you get thick skin, if you're really paying attention. So I've never been one to retreat. I always have this saying, I'm walking through the fire, but I'm not getting burned.
I have a final question for you. In this season of the show, we've been talking about people who have found their voice or are in the process of finding their voice. And I ask you that question: have you found your voice? And if you have, how are you using it to uplift the world, humanity, your neighbor today?
Well, I hope, and thank you for having me on at the podium with you. I hope I've exercised, how I'm using my voice. I feel that, a picture speaks 1,000 words. So our actions are much more powerful than what we say. So voice to me is not just the sound, the tone, and the tremble of, whatever we're saying. It is a work in progress for me. Every day I learn a little bit more about me. I have some very strong convictions, but I also leave space, room, and grace for myself to go, oh, I learned something new about myself. I learned something new about what really matters to me. So while I feel I have a voice, I feel I have a strong voice, I know when it should be silent. I know when it should whisper. I know when and how to use it in different scenarios, not meaning I change it. I just know the bandwidth of my voice.
Oh. Chef Curtis, thank you so much for your time today. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that we had this hour together.
It goes so fast. I'm like, is that an hour? It feels like 15 minutes.
We have a whole other hour in us, probably.
Right. Oh, I'm sure.
But thank you so much. And thank you for representing and for leading the way on nutrition and health, because we need the advocates. We need the advocacy.
Thank you. I agree with you. And I thank you for this time. I'm going to love watching it because I'm going to learn something else about my voice.
Yes.
At the podium.
At the podium. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick.
And to those of you who are watching or listening, remember, we all have a voice. Use yours wisely. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Chef Curtis.
Thank you. Bye.